What's up, guys? Welcome to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at Digital World Acquisition Corp, ticker symbol DWAC, on a variety of time frames in anticipation of tomorrow's trading day, Wednesday, January 31st. DWAC stock today up approximately 4.4%, down 1% or 2 after hours, but very, very low volume here in the after hours movement. As always, when volume is that ridiculously low making a move, I mean, look at this, it's ridiculously low. Hundreds of shares, not even thousands of shares, right? Absolutely take it with a grain of salt. But this is the 1 minute, we get a good look at that. Let's zoom out now to the 5-minute chart and take a peek here. Now, interestingly, looking here at the 5-minute, I get the impression that we saw some intraday traders making some plays off of some of these EMAs. You can see here this purple line, that's the 20 EMA. Not quite so much the 50 EMA, that white line, but potentially even that 9. Sometimes people use the 10 exponential moving average. That 20, though, I think the primary driver in a lot of intraday trading today. Again, these psychological levels can create price movement that wouldn't otherwise be there, which is why, and the only reason why, I like to track these things, self-fulfilling prophecies, right? Let's zoom out now to the 30-minute, get a little more context surrounding the most popular, by far, moving averages and technical indicators on some of the most popular time frames. So, for example, the 50 and 200 period moving averages on the 30-minute chart, great thing to look at. And you can see here that especially as of late, both of these moving averages, that white line again, the 50, and the gray line up top here, the 200 period, both of them in the last week or so of trading have been treated as psychological regions to clearly pay attention to. The 50 period been treated as a resistance and a support level just in the last 2 days of trading. Same deal there with the 200 period. So moving forward here on the 30-minute, primary things that I'm watching, we are within a channel between about 36.40 and about $40 a share with these two moving averages. And they're clearly areas of interest psychologically with other traders, institutions, perhaps algorithms. You know, the volume tends to pick up around those regions. So I'm certainly watching that. If you're a bull, ideally, if we see a test of that 50, looking for a hold there, a hard bounce away from there, make our way up to that $40 region where that 200 sits here on the 30-minute chart. But if you're bearish, a downside break of that 50 period is, obviously going to be crucial. Ideally, in that case, if you are a bear, you'd want to see a retest and fade down away. And, for example, if you're a bull, that's obviously something you might not want to see here looking at the 30-minute chart. I know it doesn't feel good. I know looking at things that don't fit your bias isn't comfortable, but it's important to do so. It's important to understand the psychology of not only your own side, but the enemy, so to speak. So that's what I'm looking at specifically on the 30-minute. But remember, we're never just looking at one time frame. We're always looking at multiple and then putting those together, trying to find the most important regions to watch, right? So here on the 4-hour, this is actually highly intriguing. That 50 period on the 4-hour is clearly an area to watch now. That 50 is sitting right about $35 a share. The stock itself, somewhere around $37 a share. So heading into tomorrow, whether you're a bull or a bear, we're absolutely paying attention to that level because other traders are as well. So psychologically, we have to, right? Here on the 4-hour, if you're a bull, okay, understand that we're kind of seeing a channel form between about 35 here and that $40 region. We've seen that act as kind of a newer early stage psychological level turning into somewhat of a technical level. That forms kind of a $5 channel here. If you're a bull, looking, if we do see a test of that 50 period, an obvious hold, a bounce, make a test up toward 40, and ideally a rip up through back test and then pull away, treating that $40 area as support. If you are a bear, though, however, pretty obviously, you're looking for a downside break of that 50 period here on the 4-hour. Let's zoom out now and look at kind of like the granddaddy of all the charts, probably the most crucial chart of all. That's the daily here. Now, here on the daily, and when I say most crucial, this is probably by far the most watched, and I know that the 50 and the 200 day, the white line and the gray lines, respectively, right, are the two most popular indicators on the daily chart, really no matter what stock you look at. So this right here is probably the most commonly viewed chart with the most commonly viewed indicators for most people looking at DWAC. And that's a good view, right? You want to be able to look at that and understand the self-fulfilling prophecy that is the chart. So we get confirmation here, not much else, because you see the 200-day is way down around 16, the 50-day is way down around 21 and a quarter. All we get here is confirmation of that $35 to $40 channel that we currently find ourselves in here. So the levels are really the same that we talked about back on the 4-hour chart. Worth looking at though, implied volatility, you can see here was recently as high as 205%, has now faded just down below 150%. But understand, still elevated compared to our recent past. So if you bought options back anywhere in this region here, anytime before like really 2024, or I guess you could argue mid-January, if you bought options, that goes for calls or puts, you've likely experienced some IV pump, some benefit, regardless of the delta variation there, right? If you're red or green on the position, you have benefited from some IV expansion. But if you bought options in the last few days here, or the last week or so, you've likely seen a little bit of IV crush. Again, that goes for calls or puts, just as long as you purchased them. So just to be very clear, when you're buying options, right, you always want to see IV expanding, right, going up. That's why you want to purchase them ideally when IV's low compared to the relevant trade time frame of itself. And when you're selling options, that's the opposite, right? You'd ideally want the stock itself to be stable to a point where you're comfortable, but at the same time, implied volatility being high to open yourself up for the opportunity of some IV crush. Now, let's take a look here at the options chain, see how the traders are feeling heading into tomorrow. Now, listen, this is a really interesting chain because the sample size is small, right? 39,600 total contracts traded here today. We have to take that small of a sample size with a grain of salt. Now, why is that, you may ask? Well, think about it here. You could have had one call buyer coming in by 20,000 calls, and that completely throws off the data here just from one buyer, okay? But that disclaimer out of the way, take this with a grain of salt. We're seeing nearly 79% calls today compared to puts, which is absurd. We're also seeing, about like 2.5 times the amount of short-term bullish speculation in that 0 to 20 delta range compared to that short-term bearish speculation. We're seeing 12,500 calls in that range, 4,700 puts. So again here, very small volume, very small sample size, but both the short-term speculation and the overall call-put ratio with the volume that we do have to look at here, leaning heavily to the bullish side. Listen, really quick before you go, let me know down in the comment section what stocks you guys want to see covered here in the near future, even if it is just DWAC, and I'll see you in the next one.